Okay, thanks for that, Rhona. And just one other thing that I wanted to kind of bring up is a lot of the inquiries that we have are from carers who have concerns over contact arrangements and changes to contact. Is there anything that you can say that could help shed some light on the legal basis of that?
Yes, of course. I mean, starting with the children's hearing system, often what we'll have are orders where there are called measures. These are sort of additional bits that are put onto an order. So the order might very well say that the child must reside with you, but have contact with their birth parents or siblings. But I'll deal simply with birth parents at the moment. Um, Now, there are quite often different reasons why contact will take place. We always start from the basis that the child has a right to contact with the parent and the parent has a right to contact with the child. Social work also have a legal responsibility to promote that where it's appropriate and where it's practicable. So unless there's reasons why that's not going to work, then we'll start on that basis. Contact should always be in the best interest of the child. Any decision that the children's hearing makes, there are three principles. First one is minimum intervention, which is don't take a hammer to crack a nut. Don't want to go in there and put in a whole load of legal orders when they're not needed. Second one, which Linda touched on already, is listening to what the child's views are. They must be taken into consideration. And the third one, which I consider to be the most important one, is any decision has to be made which represents the best interests of the child. So we're always looking at what the best interests of the child are. So when they're looking at contact, there can be a number of reasons for contact. It might be that they want to, assess the relationship. So social work would be supervising contact, assessing how the parent was interacting with the child, how they were anticipating their needs, how they were responding to the child, how the child was responding to them. It might have moved on a wee bit further. It might be that perhaps if a decision has been made that an alternative permanent placement is necessary, then contact could be there simply, to support the child in moving through that transition, to help them to maintain that sense of identity. So it's a hugely complex area. You're dealing with the contact between the child and the birth parent. But as the carer, your role here is absolutely crucial because, as I say, the best interest of the child is the cornerstone of all decisions that are made. So any decision maker is only as good as the information that they have. So the information that you have about contact, please make sure you pass it on to the child's social worker so that it will inform their recommendation. So, for example, we want to know how is the child before contact? How are they when they're coming back after contact? Are they talking about the parents? What other information are they giving? How is this affecting the child? And it's so important that we know that because it's supposed to be a positive resource for the child. It is their right. And as I say, social work have an obligation to make sure that it takes place, but only where it's appropriate and practicable. So the child's best interests are the most important aspect of this. So if you have information about what's happening and the child talking to you about what happened at contact, even if, as I mentioned previously, if the child's acting out, if they're going to nursery, you're hearing from the nursery teacher, if they're wetting a bed when they're coming back, or if they're really, really happy, if they're delighted, if it's something really positive, I think that's important to know. Now, it might be that a child is very upset leaving their parent, and we say, well, contact's causing them, additional stress. They might be upset because they have that very strong bond. So it's really nuanced. It's really difficult to make a decision without all that information. And your role in providing that information, I think, is more important than anybody else's because you live with the child 24 hours a day. You know what's happening. You can sense a wee change in mood, or you can see whether they're getting upset about something, or if you mention mum or dad, or, all of that. So while it might not seem to be relevant in terms of what's happening in contact, contact might be bringing up for them memories that are difficult for them to cope with, or memories that they're really happy to cope with. But that information is needed. And I think when we're making a decision about the child, we talk about the child being at the centre of the decision making, and everybody who's involved with the child holding hands around them. And I do believe that there is that community of care around them, and all of the adults being able to communicate with each other and be able to pass on the knowledge that they have, so that it helps to make the best decision for the child. And you're very much a part of that community, keeping that child safe and making sure that we get it right for them.
That's great. Thanks very much for that, Rhona. So we've spoken about contact through the children's hearing system, and one of the other things we hear about quite a lot is contact where there's a kinship care order in place. Okay, so if you've got anything you want to kind of add to that, shed some light on it, that'd be great.
Would it help if I spoke a bit about kinship care orders?
That would be wonderful, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So a kinship care order, we call them kinship care orders now. Some people call them residence orders, some people call them Section 11s, there's all different names for them. But basically, what a kinship care order is that a court has put in place an order that says that you share parental rights and responsibilities with the birth parents. So some of them would have been taken away from the birth parents, some of them will be shared, some of them you'll have absolutely. Usually with a kinship care order, what has been taken away is the parent's right to determine where the child is going to stay. Therefore, it's called the residence order. But each kinship care order is very specific to you. So I think it's important for you to know exactly what the decision of the sheriff was. There's something called an interlocutor. You can get it from the Sheriff Clerk. It sounds fancy, it's not really. All it means is that's a decision that the sheriff made in this particular, what they call case. But it's not a case, it's your life. But it's important that you know what that interlocutor was, because it's different in each kinship care order. And it can sometimes be very specific about contact. And it can say, contact will take place once or a week or once a month, or only when the child wants it, or various other ways of expressing it. But it's important that you have an understanding exactly what the order says. Now, the important thing about the kinship care order is that it doesn't give you the security that perhaps a permanence order might. I'll move on to that later. But for a kinship care order, it means that the birth parent can come back because they share parental rights and responsibilities with you. So they share these decision-making powers with you. And it might be that they come back and they say to the sheriff, I want that changed. I want you to give me more contact, or I want the child to live with me, or I want this, or I want that. And it means you've got to go back down to court, and you've got to be able to appear in front of the sheriff and say what your position is in relation to contact or anything else. So the thing about the kinship care order is, although it does give you that level of security, and the child is staying with you under the sort of residence section of it, it can be challenged and changed, and it's something that you must be aware of. Now, I know that this can present difficulties, particularly in relation to legal fees that might arise, because you want to be represented by somebody who's able to put forward what your view is, and it's something to be aware of. So what I would say about kinship care orders is that if social work, the local authority, are saying, we want to move forward, we want, we're supporting you in the kinship care order, they might help to pay for the legal expenses of acquiring that kinship care order. But please be aware that there may be further legal expenses. But, further down the line, if the parent challenges or wants to change something, So be clear with the local authority at the point where they're encouraging you to go for the kinship care order, to be very clear about what their responsibility will be in future in terms of what the legal fees might be. So that's that's all that I can say about it, is to make sure that you are prepared in advance. So the kinship care order is, I think it's an excellent way of moving forward. It means that the child is no longer a looked after child. You can go on with your life. You will get your kinship care allowance, providing that you're eligible for that. We'll cover that at a later date. But it's an excellent way of getting out of the children's hearing system, so that you're not constantly going back to hearings and panel members making decisions about your life and about the child's life and about other people's lives. So it can be really good from that point of view, but it's to be aware that this isn't a permanent solution if there isn't a degree of agreement amongst the adults within the child's life. I think it's great when there is agreement there, because you can move forward and it's less formal, and it gives you that legal authority to be able to make decisions with and for the child. But if there is disagreement between you and the birth parents, there can be difficulties at a future date. And I would say make sure that you're quite clear about what's going to happen if that arises.
And
And contact is one of those areas where at a future date it can mean that you need to go back to court and get some kind of resolution.
yeah. And I think that's wonderful, Rhona. It's really important to know the impact of applying for such a legal order, and the possibilities further down the line. So important that people have that information before they start the process. So thanks very much for that. Something else that does come up quite a lot from kinship carers who have a kinship care order is they often have inquiries about applying for a passport. Um, and I don't know if that's something that you've ever come across.
Yes, yeah, I have. Legally, it's quite technical,
Yeah,
because if the parents still retain certain rights in respect of the child, then a child can't be taken out of the country unless everybody with parental rights and responsibilities agrees with that. Certain rights and responsibilities. So that's why it's really important to know exactly what it is your kinship care
yeah,
order says. Um, so you have to be able to look at that. Sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not. If the parents retain certain parental rights and responsibilities, particularly in relation to contact, then you would have to get their permission.
yeah,
So if we have a situation where the parent is withholding that permission, we have something where we can go to the court and we can ask the court to dispense with their right to consent to the child being taken out of the country. Uh, Again, that's going to be expensive, because you're going to have to put forward your case. You're probably going to have to employ a solicitor, and it's doable. It could be expensive, and it takes me back to the point that I made before. Kinship care orders work really well when all the adults in the child's life are working together. Um, a reasonable parent wouldn't withhold their consent to a passport application and the child being taken out of the country. But there are some situations now. For example, during COVID, there were some birth parents who said, I don't want my child taken out of the country," even although the lockdown rules had been lifted for us. They were still really quite anxious about it. I'm not sure how unreasonable that was. I really
yeah,
don't know, because it was just simply, I feel uncomfortable about it, as opposed to, look, I've got 2 weeks booked. We could go off to, some fantastic holiday. I could take your child, and they're just saying, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. and being really unreasonable about it. There's a difference there.
Yeah.
And that's why, if you had to go to court, which you would have to go to if the parents still retain certain parental rights and responsibilities, um, the likelihood in one case, the sheriff would say, well, I think that's actually a reasonable concern raised by a lot of reasonable parents. And in another situation, he might say, no, look, you're just being thrown about this. There's no reason why that child shouldn't go off and have that fantastic experience.
Yeah.
So that's, as far as passports are concerned, it is a tricky one.
Yeah. Thanks very much for that, Rhona. Nice to hear your viewpoint on that, and where people stand in terms of the law as well, which is really interesting, because it's not always as clear cut as one would initially expect or think.
Eric, the projectionist.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Rhona. So we have spoken quite a bit about the children's hearing system, and we've also spoken about kinship care orders. Something else that we hear about quite often from carers is permanence orders. Would you like to tell us a wee bit about that?
Yeah, permanence orders I think they're really helpful. They're helpful to get the child out the children's hearing system, and what they do is they remove the parental rights and responsibilities from the parents and vest them in the local authority. There are two bits to a permanence order. There is one bit that always stays with the local authority, and that is deciding where the child's going to stay. And the second bit is responsibility for the child's well-being. You've got what's called ancillary rights. Now, they can either be shared with the local authority and the kinship carer, or else kept with the local authority. Sometimes the local authority say, look, I'm keeping them to myself, but I'll allow you to do it on my behalf. And the second way is for the court to say, right, local authority is going to keep these two bits that they have to keep, which are called the mandatory provisions about where the child's going to stay and about the responsibility for the well-being, but everything else we're going to give across to the kinship carer. And just as I said about the Section 11 or the kinship care order, make sure that you look at what the particular permanence order says in relation to you and the child that you're looking after. Because one of the important aspects of this is it's supposed to be tailored to the needs of the child. So it's going to be different for every child. So the permanence order, as I say, is a really good way of making sure that the parental rights and responsibilities are removed from the parents. It's different from the kinship care order. So while it can be challenged, it's more difficult to challenge a permanence order, and it means that the child continues to be a looked after child, and I'll come to the reasons why that's important later. So a permanence order will mean that the local authority has got parental rights and responsibilities for the child, but you will be looking after the child. And it means that the parent can't come back and, ask for it to be looked at again without very good reason for the court doing that. It makes it very difficult for them to do it. I think that in the name itself, the permanence order is very helpful. It means a permanent removal of parental rights and responsibilities. It means it's permanent. Quite often we'll use that with children who are perhaps a bit older, children where we think it's unlikely that they will be adopted, or children where we want to have that security, where they're living with kinship carers, but we reduce the possibility of the parents having any further impact on the child's life. So permanence orders have their place. Only the local authority can apply for permanence orders. Just as in kinship care orders, only the kinship carer can apply for those. So it's up to the local authority to apply for those. I think they're really, really useful in situations where we know that there is a very reduced likelihood of the parent being able to discharge their parental rights and responsibilities in respect of the child. Throughout the child's childhood, is it likely their mum and dad are going to be able to look after them? If that's not likely, if the parents aren't accepting of that fact, I can see the real attraction of permanence orders there, because it gives security to you as the carers, the fact that parental rights and responsibilities have been removed legally by the court. That's permanent, and I think it is reassuring. When it comes to your position, then, as I said before, you can either be in one of two positions. Either the court has said, I want to share these ancillary provisions between local authority and foster carers or kinship carers, and all the day-to-day decisions are yours and yours alone. Or it might be that they've said, I'm going to vest them in the local authority, and they're saying, could you do this on my behalf? So it means that you can just go on with your life. So while you're a kinship carer, you don't have a kinship care order, and in all sort of legal terms, you are what's called a foster carer, because you're looking after this child on behalf of the local authority because the parents can't do it. And that has very significant ramifications in terms of what your financial eligibility is for allowances.
Oh.
The other thing that is really important that I said I would come back to was about the fact that when the child gets older, because the child under a permanence order is a looked after child, they are eligible to continuing care. And that means right up until their 21st birthday, they can stay with you. You will be financially and in other respects supported to look after the child. And right up until their 26th birthday, they are eligible for aftercare, which places legal responsibilities on the local authority to make sure that their welfare is properly looked after in terms of housing, education, employment, to support them, because they realise that they have got this enhanced need. Under a kinship care order, they don't have that. Under a permanence order, they do have that. And that is financially and in terms of the support that is available and the wonderful support that you can get from social work with their expertise, that is open to the child right up until their 26th birthday. So it's something to bear in mind, even although it means the child remains a looked after child. Some kinship carers prefer to keep the agencies at arm's length, and I can understand why kinship care orders would be attractive. But when it comes to permanence order, if the child's a looked after child, then the responsibility remains with the local authority right up until the 26th birthday. And I think it's important for kinship carers to understand what that distinction is and the difference that it can make in terms of your ability to be able to provide care for the child in the way that you want to as they become a young person. And I know it's hard, when they're just really young and thinking, oh, one day they're going to be 17 and they're going to be, wanting to go to college or go to work or anything else. But in a lot of respects, I think it is something that you have to bear in mind for their sake for the future. And just make sure that you have that advice to work out what is best for you. Go to the solicitors who understand these things and are able to explain them to you so that you know that you're making the right decision, because there's nothing worse than thinking you've made the wrong decision or else tormenting yourself with thinking, could I have done something differently? So just be informed. And I think that's why KCASS is so good, because you can come to us and you can say, well, what should I do about this? This is the situation that I'm in. And while these podcasts are great, it comes down very often to the individual needs of the child and also what you want to support you to be the best carers that you can be.
So thanks very much for joining us today, Rhona. It's been really informative, and I'm sure the carers will gain a lot from that. For anybody watching today, if you have any questions, the details, our contact details will be on the page where you've clicked onto this. So just get in touch with us. You might have some questions around some particular areas that are of interest to you. We're more than happy to answer that. Thank you.